Uh, the Marcelo thing is it's just frustrating to watch at this point to see how his career is unfolding. I think so. The Vasquez point. Well, here's the ultimate point. I think in the international break and many not being called up and stuff, and that in itself is a weird thing that's happening. But
Yeah.
understandably, Lucas Digne is actually playing really well for the French national team, and it's not like they're terribly short on wingbacks. So on some level, I get it, but I do think Mendy is still a must inclusion. But hey, I'm actually not complaining because I'm happy if he doesn't go. But I do think it's important for him to be part of the international tournaments, obviously, because it's good for Real Madrid to have all those players involved in those. But given that he's not selected and it doesn't seem like he needs rest, it seemed weird not to start him. But the main point I would say it's weird not to start him is because in a game where you don't have Casemiro, you know you're going to be needing extra coverage when you don't have him. Starting Marcelo when you already have Lucas Vasquez on the right is a very, very risky move. And I think we can transition to Marcelo talk now, actually. And by the way, Lucas Vasquez on the other side, I'm not going to sit here and start blaming Lucas Vasquez for a bunch of things, mostly because he's playing out of position for the fourth straight game now. And he's been awesome in that position unexpectedly for 3.5 games. And this was his first bad game where Gaia just completely had his number. Vasquez's positioning was bad. He was giving the ball away in key areas. He was getting his pocket picked. He had the handball, which was a little bit unfortunate for the first penalty. So Vasquez did not have a good game, but, Vasquez slander, I think, is not necessarily fair just because he's playing out of his position, and this was his first bad game at that position, playing out of position. There's a question from our patron, Marcelo, which we usually read these questions at the end, but because it ties in the discussion, we'll just read it now. Sad Omar, our patron, says, Marcelo is a death sentence to this team. He single-handedly guarantees us a shitty defense and a bad result. I just wish we had another left back that could play. Why is Zidane so stubborn and hell-bent on playing him? Have we won any games where Marcelo has played this season? Okay, so that's the end of the question. So I just wanted to bring up a couple things before we get into his performance tonight. The thing is with Marcelo, Marcelo is not Real Madrid's starting left back. He is the backup left back / a rotational starter who comes in here and there, which, look, I don't think any club in 2020 would be complaining about that scenario where you have Marcelo, one of the greatest wingbacks of all time, a little bit older in his career, as your second left back. I don't think that's something to complain about. I think the issue is that he's actually declining so fast that player on paper is better than the player in practice when he's actually on the field. And because his defense has never improved in his career, you're banking on his offense, and the problem is his offense is declining. A layer of paint is coming off of Marcelo offensively year by year. And when you look at who would have been a better option to bring off the bench, would have been Sergio Reguilon or Marcelo? Well, the answer is Reguilon. The problem is that Reguilon in that role maybe is not something that he'd be accepting. And from a developmental standpoint, he is getting, he's gone to the school of Lopetegui and now he's at the school of Mourinho, and he's playing so well that I assume if Real Madrid exercise that buyback option in a couple of years, he's going to come back an awesome player. Knock on wood that the club is in a position to do that and it makes sense in 2 years. There's going to be 1 year of weird limbo if Marcelo leaves 1 year early and they have to fill that spot, and then we can cross that bridge when we get there. Marcelo tonight, Matt, admittedly, I thought offensively he wasn't too bad. Again, we were talking about the cutbacks and stuff. I thought there were moments where he showed his press resistancy of old, where he deals well with pressure, even deep in his own half. A nice touch, cut inside. He had this one where he does that, and then he passes it with his right foot out wide. It opens Valencia up completely. But he did, as his legs kind of went in the second half, some of his passing started to lag. And his defensive sequences were not flattering in this game. Ironically, I thought the one where he concedes a penalty, I thought that one wasn't his fault because there was a bunch of dominoes leading up to that, and he was just doing his best to try to piece things together. So the intent was there. So, Marcelo, give me all your takes, Matt, wherever you want to start.
All right. So I'll build off some of what you said, Kiyan. You mentioned that I think that was a great line. The fact that he's on paper, yeah, he sounds like what a great rotational piece to have. What a great second string left back. But he's not that player anymore, and he's not. It is sad how dramatic the decline has been, but he's just not. He's not there. He's not Real Madrid level anymore. It's the fact of the matter, and it's been that way for quite a while. It's not just this season. I mean, you could go back to even the Lopetegui year. I mean, I think he's been poor since then. And so this has been, like you said, year after year, the layer of paint coming off. And yes, Reguilon went to the school of Lopetegui, is going to the school of Mourinho, but in my opinion, he never should have left in the first place. He should be at the school of Real Madrid year after year, competing and trying to win that position and learning at the school of Real Madrid, because there's no better place, and he would be a perfect player to compete with Mendy. There will be certain games where he's required, like even big games where he would be required over Mendy just for their playing styles. Yes, it's going to take a sales pitch to convince him that this is where he needs to be, but I don't think it's that hard. I don't think it's as hard as it was with Ashraf. I really don't. I think Reguilon would have taken the challenge. But besides the fact, back to this game, the biggest, you mentioned that PK wasn't the one that Marcelo actually gave away, the foul. I agree, that wasn't his fault. It was, I mean, you could call that a foul on Maxi. But the third penalty was Marcelo. This is the handball that Ramos got called for, the handball, right? Well, that could have been so easily prevented if Marcelo was in the right position. So and I know I'm skipping ahead here to the third penalty, but let's just play this. Here's what happens before that handball by Ramos. Valencia play a long ball. The defense, namely Varane and Ramos, drop off like they should to win the header. The second ball then falls to Valencia. Valencia dribbles at our center, or the heart of our defense, so Ramos steps up. When one defender in a back line steps up, the other three converge centrally in behind him. Marcelo did not converge. Marcelo let Musa get a 5-yard sprint in front of him and then started to chase him. And so Ramos ends up having to not only try and win the ball, but then drop off and cover Musa. And so in doing that, that's when the handball occurs. So in reality, it shouldn't have been Ramos even covering Musa. It should have been Marcelo. And that's where my frustration is, because how many times have we seen that already this season with Marcelo? Out of position, trying to run back into position when it's too late. The goal's already, or the PK's already happened. And so that's where my frustration is. Like, this is happening far too often with Marcelo.
Yeah, your point about the regular minutes, too, just to go back for a second, is also interesting, because I think having him come back this season would have been like the issues, I guess, the problems and headaches that would have arisen with him and Mendy in the same team and the minute distribution would have been worth it. Because if you compare it to the other problem of like the 1 year where Marcelo leaves and then you don't have a backup for Mendy and you don't know how to fill that role, and it's going to be awkward. And if you sign somebody who is going to be there long term, then all of a sudden then you can't bring Reguilon unless you negotiate Reguilon's buyback a year from now, which might solve some things. Reguilon has played 645 minutes this season, Marcelo 450, and some of the reason why Reguilon has played a little bit more is because England has had cup games, and Reguilon has gotten some minutes there, so it might actually balance out. So the minute the minute chasm between the two is actually not that deep. Um, with the goal conceded, so you got into some of that. You jumped ahead a little bit, and that's totally cool. So let's start with the we can I guess we can talk about the first. The only reason I want to talk about the first penalty is just the fact that the replay of the VAR over and over again showing that Marcelo just with his hands on his knees, watching Musa waltz into the box and reacting like 8 hours after the play was really telling to me. Like that just can't happen. Like even though that actually was
Yeah, I forgot to mention
inconsequential.
that.
Yeah, even though that it was inconsequential to the result because that the penalty was retaken anyway, just that scene, that image of Marcelo with his hands on his knees watching everybody just waltz into the box was not a good sign to me.